Faith. It's a very, very powerful concept. You know, when you're young and you make mistakes, but you assume that what you're doing is right, and then you have to pay the consequences for the mistakes that you make. Let me give you an example. If some of you in this class had done things the right way, and I know it's a relative term, the way usually these things work, at least, you know, in the culture from which I come, you graduate from high school around the age 18, you go to college for about 2 years, that's 20. You go to a 4-year school and you're done with your bachelor's when you're 22. If you decide to continue, you have your master's by the time you're 24, and you have your PhD by the time you're about 30 or so. So you don't do any of that, and time passes. And one day you wake up, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, damn, life gave me so many opportunities, all squandered. And then you suffer because of it, and then maybe you get sad or depressed or angry, and then you put yourself to school, and you're like 35 now. So whatever the age may be, doesn't matter. And then you realize something really interesting. You actually, at this stage in your life, you have the capacity to hear and listen and learn and change and understand. And all of a sudden, all the mistakes you had made in your life, something sprouts inside you that if it wasn't for all the mistakes I had made, I wouldn't be here now. And all of a sudden, there is this dim hint of trust and faith that blossoms inside you, that maybe mistakes are made for a reason. Maybe I am here for a reason, okay? And all of a sudden, faith has this, it's like alchemy, this component that removes the wrinkles that have bothered you so many times and so often from your past. And you look yourself within the context of all the mistakes that you've made, and you say, you know what? I have faith that things will be okay. Faith is also about trust. You trust something. Whether you're a transcendentalist like Emerson and Thoreau, where you say, you know what? Nature has a way with things. You know, I am part of nature, as Nietzsche would say, the German philosopher. Since I am part of nature, and nature is organic, and I am part of life, and life is organic, life is going somewhere, I'm going with life, and things happen, and nature has a tendency of correcting itself. My life will eventually be corrected. So there is this thing that you tap into the past, and somehow you tap into the future, and they're both governed by faith and trust. And, you know, it's one of those things where you're married, you trust your judgment, things don't work out, you no longer have faith in your judgment, time passes, you find a companion, you have hope, you have trust, you have faith. And then arguments take place, then you lose your trust, then you lose your faith, you begin to self-doubt, then all of a sudden you have the ability to communicate, then trust, faith, everything comes back. And that's how we function. You know, in many ways, we are in the land of purgatory, that you wake up this morning, you have hope. You take a nap, you wake up from the afternoon nap, and you're in despair. In despair, you have zero faith. In hope, you have a good amount of faith. And that's how things work, you know. And it's difficult to kind of figure out how you can find stability, because we are emotional nomads. I'm not like the Buddha, who can come up with a single focused philosophy of life, that life is suffering, period. There is nothing permanent in life. I am walking, but I may fall apart. I have a marriage, but it may fall apart. I have kids, they may die. And so you walk in life without trusting anything, depending on anything that life offers you, knowing that at any time, everything could be taken away from you. I'm just a regular guy. You know, I read a couple of books, got some Photoshop degrees, and I have no idea how hope comes, and I have no idea how it disappears, and I have no idea how faith comes and how it disappears. All I know is that the world has a great amount of power over me. It makes me, it breaks me. There is something about faith, though. It's magical. You trust something you can't see, you can't smell, you can't touch. It's beyond your 5 senses, and it's beautiful. And when you have faith, to some extent, it makes you magical. I just don't know the healthiness of faith and hope long term, especially if your temperament is one of realism. If you're an optimist, if that's the way you've been wired, you're going to see everything, you know, on the positive side. Can I tell you a story? So there is this little young chap who's walking to go to Beyonce's concert. And on his way to the concert, he hears this man shouting, and he becomes curious. He peeks in, and there is this man giving a sermon, and it's beautiful. It's like the Sermon of the Buddha or the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus. And for a few minutes, he forgets all about Beyonce and why he left the house in the first place. He kind of gets glued by the door, you know? And he keeps listening and listening and listening and listening. And at a certain point, he looks at his watch and it's like 2 in the morning. And he's been standing by the door for the past like 10 hours. And when the sermon is over, he goes to this guy who's giving this riveting sermon. And he says, what's the possibility of me actually being inside the lecture hall and listening to you? It's very possible, but there are some prerequisites. Now, what you have in this is hope. That first you have the hope of getting to the concert. All of a sudden, something obstacles your path. You listen, you become intoxicated. The Beyonce hope goes away. That narrative is completely erased, and now it's replaced with a different kind of a hope, okay? Beyonce is delicious to the ears. Beyonce may be delicious to the eyes. But all of a sudden you have a sermon that you hear it, but it touches a different part of you and you don't know what, okay? So you are removed from your physical body to, let's just say, the intellectual, emotional, psychological, maybe even spiritual body if you believe in those things. And now he goes forward and asks this man this question for one reason. He hopes that the answer that he gets is going to be a positive one. Yes, you can actually come and sit and listen. He also has another assumption, which is if I listen or when I listen, I can understand. So there is faith in yourself, there is hope in yourself, and hope and faith in the other person. Okay, that you're earnest, that he can see the earnestness inside you, and you'll say, yes, come and sit. But this old man looks at this young kid and says, yeah, the condition is you need to clean the toilets for about 2 years. No, I don't want to clean the toilets. I want to listen to you talk. I understand that, but you need to clean the toilets. Now, for those of you who want to change something about your life, there is this new inspired version of you. I want to change. There is this old version of you that is addicted to all sorts of things, doing the same thing on a routine, thinking the same way about things, feeling the same way about the things, reacting the same way about the things. These are your addictions, okay? But you also have this tiny little seed, I want to change. And let's just say you like your past, and you think everything about your past is good. Well, you have a self that stands in the way. And one of the things that this old man understands is, as long as this old Amir is there, it doesn't matter how intense your inspiration, you're always going to remain the same. Somehow this old self needs to be destroyed. Now this old man knows this about this kid and says, wash toilets. I couldn't do it. And I don't think anyone in this class would be able to do it. How could you lower yourself to such an extent? And he does. He washes toilets for about 2 years, you know, and this is the Middle East. You know, this is your house, the toilet like is in your backyard. And we don't have backyards, you have front yards. And it's dark, there is no electricity. And what you have as toilets is someone comes, they dig a huge hole in the ground, you know, they put 2 by 6s, and you just stand, and you go like this, and you just dump. Nothing to flush. And then if you're lucky, you know, you call someone, you go somewhere, find someone who can come with a bulldozer, if there is some in your country, they can come and dig up all the crap, remove it, and then the thing starts again. So when I talk about toilets, you know, don't think like you can go to Costco and grab scrubbers and then go to the toilet bowl that like you have at the house and just clean it. It doesn't work that way. And when the 2 years are over, this young kid goes to this man and says, I'm ready, I'm done. Okay, good. Well, why don't you now go to the kitchen and wash the floors? Long story short, from the floors, then he goes to wash the dishes, then he pours tea for the people in the lecture hall, then he takes the tea and offers it to the people who are sitting and listening, and then he's finally admitted to the lecture hall, but he has to sit way in the back where he can't hear anything because there are no microphones way back then, and then he's allowed to sit in the middle, then ultimately in the front. Now remember, you're not going to do any of this stuff if there is no hope inside you. You're not going to do any of this stuff if you don't have faith in your teacher or yourself that eventually you will get to the main hall. So the driving force of all human activities, hope and faith. Lose them. And then like Rumi, you will say, "Ro sar beneh be balin tanha mara raha kon." And so this young kid one day goes to the lecture hall and people say, "Who are you?" He says, "I've been here for the past 15 years. What do you mean, who am I? We don't know who you are. Get out." And the teacher had told him that if this kid comes in, just beat him up. And he gets beaten up. But his teacher recognizes him. He still has faith and hope in him. And there comes a point where the teacher says to him, I have no idea who you are. 2 years of toilet cleaning, 2 years of kitchen, washing dishes, serving tea, sitting at the end of the hall, middle of the hall where the teacher is, being friends with people, being friends with the teacher, they're all destroyed. Then the teacher goes to the people of the town and say, when this guy comes to sell you baskets, don't buy anything from him. In fact, tell him you guys don't recognize him. So what you have is a teacher who knows the function of hope, who knows the function of faith, who also knows at what stage hope and faith need to be destroyed. And the kid ultimately, out of desperation, goes to the cemetery. Goes to the cemetery because he is a living dead. Okay? The only people who can perhaps recognize him are the dead. And there he prays, and then out of exhaustion, he just falls asleep. And he has a dream. And it's a very illuminating, enlightening dream. And he wakes up, he's calm, he's at peace. The teacher knows exactly what's happening. You know, he and his disciples walk to the cemetery, and this kid asks him, why did he do all of this? He says, your past was an obstacle. I had to get rid of it. You thought that just because you do the bathroom, just because you do the kitchen, just because you're done with a task, you can be admitted to the lecture hall. I had to destroy all those hopes and faith. Then you thought you had friends. I had to get rid of that. You thought you had a teacher you could depend on. I had to get rid of that. And then ultimately you came to the city of the dead, the cemetery. And the only person you could reach is God. And it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or a religionist, at a certain point, something about you calls out towards something. It doesn't matter what it is, what name you want to give it. Once you have lost hope and faith in everything about yourself and the people around you and physical life, then maybe something magical can take place inside you. So I suppose another answer to your question is, you can have faith and hope in your physical body. You can have faith and hope in your emotional body. You can have faith and hope in your psychological body. And by psychological, I mean, it's a storehouse of belief systems, experiences accumulated over the years. It could also be a trauma that lives inside you. And the word psychology is psyche, it's like soul. You know, if you've had a traumatic experience, it leaks everywhere. You know, it contaminates your thinking, your body, everything. And you can also have hope in your spiritual, faith in your spiritual bodies. I just don't know what the spiritual body, hope, and faith look like. What this particular story talks about, though, is that if you have hope and faith in your body, it will crumble. If you have hope and faith in other people, because human beings, for the most part, are confused. We are born confused, and we're going to live out our lives confused. We're going to live with a bucket of assumptions, and eventually life is going to tell us that those assumptions are very, very, very wrong. And the sort of emotions that we have, they're quite flimsy. You know, you love today, you hate tomorrow, you're indifferent day after. You trust today, then you doubt, you know. So there is nothing that you can really depend on down here. Your hopes and your faiths will continuously be resurrected, born resurrected, crucified, and that's how things work. The only thing that remains true, perhaps, is, you know, the teachings of the great sages of humanity. Maybe life is bad, as the Buddha said. Maybe there is nothing worth doing down here, as Socrates and Plato argued. But I think as long as you haven't reached, if you want to call it spiritual maturity, you should keep hope and faith alive within the context of your physical life, your emotional life, and your intellectual life. Go to school, because you hope and you have faith in your own capacity to understand things. Fall in love many times, and have faith and have hope in your capacity to be able to love and to recover just in case bad things happen. Continue jogging and being on a good diet. Have faith that your body will not all of a sudden one day wake up and tell you, I have cancer or something. There is nothing wrong with any of that. It gives you purpose and meaning and value. It's great.